If you've had an explosion or a fire at your workplace that caused injuries, you might have a case beyond just a typical workers' compensation claim. So if that happened to you, stay tuned and watch this video. Unfortunately, explosions and fires at workplaces seem to be happening more and more frequently. Here in Georgia, we've had multiple news stories lately of giant explosions or chemical burns or things that have happened where workers are showing up to work like a normal day and something happens in the factory, in the workspace that either causes a large explosion or a fire. Now, unfortunately, many of these injuries that occur are catastrophic. People die, people have permanent burns or chemical burns on their body. And so you need to know what your rights are if this happens to you or a loved one while they're at work. Because often the company that they work for is going to steer them to a workers' comp claim. And there absolutely may be a workers' comp claim, and I would recommend speaking to an attorney about the workers' comp claim. But there also might be a liability claim because in some states, like Georgia, if there's a third party who's responsible, where the fire was caused, or the explosion, or the chemical burn, then you might also have a claim against that third party. And so you don't want to let that claim just disappear or vanish because you don't know or understand that you should hire an attorney to research that for you. Let me give you an example of how this happens. So let's say that there's a factory and an individual shows up to work and let's say there's a leaking gas tank, right? That's maintained by a third-party company that fills that gas tank of some toxic chemical or toxic gas that's used in the production. And then ultimately that tank leaks and there's an explosion. The individual who's injured might have a case against that third-party company that maintains that toxic gas, that maintains that tank, in addition to their typical workers' compensation case. Now, these cases are extremely complicated because no two cases the same, right? In Georgia, for example, it could be a explosive gas. It could be faulty wiring in the wall, which would then be a case against a property owner, or it even could be just improper storage of chemicals by maybe an adjacent business. So let's say something happens at the business next door and it causes injuries to the workers of a adjacent business. These are all very unique situations that require a deep dive into the fact-specific issues in your particular case. Now, my firm has handled, dozens of these cases for workers who thought that all they had was a workers' compensation case, and then really they had this extremely large liability claim as well. And a liability claim allows you to get things like your medical bills paid for if workers' comp didn't cover them. Also allows you to maybe get that workers' comp payment and maybe reimburse your employer for what they went through or what they had to pay. It allows you to get the time you miss from work, but it also allows you to get your pain and suffering and sometimes even something called punitive damages. Punitive damages are things if someone was so negligent that they were considered reckless and basically created this terrible risk to workers on the property, punitive damages are sometimes appropriate, and punitive damages are used to punish that company. And so these punitive damages are also something that can be added on a liability claim that are not on a workers' compensation claim. I tell families all the time, even if you're like, I don't want to do a liability claim, it's not about the money for me, I just miss my family member who died or they've suffered catastrophic injuries, do it for others. Because if you bring that claim and you get those punitive damages, that's going to send a message to that company that we do not tolerate this level of lax standards that makes it unsafe for workers, and you better never do this again. And so you might be saving lives by bringing a separate liability claim. And so all these things are important, and all these things are aspects that an experienced lawyer can investigate, can advise you on, and make sure that your rights are protected. And make sure that punitive claim is protected if necessary as well, to make sure that this terrible behavior, this reckless, negligent behavior never happens again. And so don't just be satisfied by taking the workers' compensation case. talk to an experienced lawyer who does these cases, who understands them, to see what other liability claims might be out there. Because in many of these situations, if it's a third party who had anything to do with the negligence that caused the injury, they also could be responsible. Now, let me tell you the unfortunate part of these cases is generally these cases apply to many individuals. And sometimes there's a lot of injured individuals who deserve a liability claim, and there might not be enough insurance to cover everyone's claim. And so that's why it's really important to have a lawyer who's going to find every dollar of available insurance, but also who's going to hold the company responsible so that if the company needs to pay because they didn't purchase enough insurance, they do so. Because you should not have to suffer because the insurance company does not have enough insurance to cover everyone's injuries. And so you also want an attorney that understands this and different insurance layering. Sometimes there's different insurance policies based on how serious the incident is. And so this is our specialty. This is what we do, is represent injured people in situations just like this. So if this happened to you or a family member, please give us a call just so that you know through a free consultation whether or not you even have a case. Because if you don't make the phone call, evidence can disappear, and you might be leaving very important money that's on the table that could help your family get back on their feet after something catastrophic like this happens. So give us a call. If you're in the state of Georgia, we'll talk to you about your case, whether or not we can help you. Even if you're not in Georgia, we have contacts basically in all 50 states. I know great lawyers all across the country, and I can connect you with the right one that can help you, that's not just somebody who runs TV commercials in the area, because these cases are not typical car accident cases. This is not something that you want to call someone who has billboards or TV. You want to call the right lawyer that's going to fight for you and not just do a quick settlement for, like I said, maybe that first layer of insurance, and leaves millions of dollars on the table that you could have gotten if you were properly compensated with a proper attorney. And so I recommend you call us. Let us do a free case evaluation. And if you like getting these updates and learning more about the law, obviously like and subscribe. But until next time, everyone stay safe, and thanks for watching.